Pentagon is asking for a major boost to military spending for the year 2019, saying that it needs to counter threats from China and Russia. In fact, it has told the United States Congress that China is coercing its neighbors to reorder the Indo-Pacific region. Would that mean then that China is trying to turn the vast Indian Ocean into the China Ocean? Now, this is what the Pentagon said during its annual defense budget. I quote, "China is leveraging military modernization, influence operations and predatory economics to coerce neighboring countries to reorder the Indo-Pacific region to their advantage." End quote. Simply put, the United States' statement says that China is pursuing a military modernization program that seeks Indo-Pacific regional hegemony. The statement goes on to say, I quote again, "China is using predatory economics to intimidate its neighbors while militarizing features in the South China Sea." End quote. Now, it's well known that Beijing is investing heavily in several infrastructure projects in the region, such as in Sri Lanka's ports of Colombo and Hambantota, which give Beijing a trade outpost into the Indian Ocean. And the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which is a colossal infrastructure project, connects China's western territories to the Indian Ocean. Joining me this evening is Einar Tangen. He's the author of The Kunshan Way and Beijing. He's joining us pardon me, I'm going to figure out where he is in just a bit. Mohan Guruswamy, Chairman, Center for Policy Alternatives, is also joining us from New Delhi. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you both for being here with us. Mr. Guruswamy, if I can ask you first, are India's concerns about China in some way reflected in the statement from the Pentagon?
To some extent, yes. But India has more concerns than that. The Indo-Pacific region is a huge region, and the Americans are still by far the dominant power in the region, so that is of no immediate concern that the Chinese will upset the apple cart. I don't see it happening now or in the foreseeable future, or even in the next 30-40 years. But I think India faces a challenge on its immediate borders and its immediate vicinity, where the Chinese build-up is continuing unabated. China's economy keeps growing, and its defense budget, even if it remains the same as a percentage of GDP, keeps growing much faster than our budgets grow. And the Chinese right now deploy a far number of troops and forces on our borders than we have had seen before. And even in the Indian Ocean now, with long-range submarines and new aircraft carriers, in the Indian Ocean, the immediate region could also be contested. Right now, the Indian Navy kind of enjoys some kind of a primacy here, and that might be contested. So I think we've got reasons to worry about this. Chinese actions in Doklam, which is very important because Doklam is Bhutanese territory. And the attempt to price Bhutan away from the Indian security environment, we see some repeat beginning to happen in the Maldives. The Chinese are entering into trade agreements to buy some atolls.
Right.
And that is a dangerous development. So I think we've got to watch out and be very careful. And we can't expect the Americans to pull our chestnuts out of the fire either.
Fair enough. Stay with me a while longer, sir. Let me go across to Einar Tangen, our guest who's joining us also this evening. Einar, what do you make of the Pentagon's assessment of Chinese hegemony, especially in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, I think it's very much in line with their desire to use India as kind of a doorstop to Chinese expansion. I note my colleague mentioned Indo-Pacific, which is, although it's an old term, it's only had a recent resurgence, somehow signifying that the Indian and Pacific Oceans are somehow joined. Prior to that, I mean, if there's some belief that there's a desire to get beyond the immediate areas of interest, I think China would have probably some concerns also that India is joining with Japan, Australia, and the U.S. in a kind of pre-First World War kind of alliance, which is obviously targeting China. I don't think it's anybody is surprised that China is developing its Belt and Road Initiative, which requires it to establish trade ports throughout these areas. These are nothing new. These have been on the landscape for quite some time. They've been put down. You can see it in the numerous maps that are out there. I think India really has a choice at this point. They can view China with suspicion and say that they're trying to establish hegemony, or they can say, look, this is a trading partner. It's an opportunity. There are very few other economic alliances out there that can equal the kind of breadth and depth of what the Chinese are proposing. And quite frankly, it could be of great help to India, especially since India needs a tremendous amount of investment for its own infrastructure. I think China has been fairly clear that it wants to extend the hand of friendship. But to this date, I can understand that India says, look, we're going at this cautiously. I know you're concerned about things in Nepal, along the borders and areas along there. But I don't think China has pushed any kind of ideology. And remember, if there was any kind of blockade in the South China Seas or Indian Seas, the group that would be most at risk and hurt would be China, because it depends on bringing resources in and sending out added value goods out. So it's not a situation where in any way, shape, or form China could benefit from any kind of warfare or trade warfare.
All right. It's interesting that you say that the term Indo-Pacific is a recent phenomenon, and it actually... I mean, it's interesting. I'll tell you why. Because when it came to Doklam, the reference that the Chinese made to certain areas saying that it was their territory date back to maps that were, dating back centuries. So anyway, we leave that to another time. Let me go back to Mr. Guruswamy. Would it be premature, sir, for India, to assume that there's anything other than the United States' own concerns about its global dominance when it is referring to China? Are our concerns sort of packed in somewhere there, or is that premature for us to assume?
Well, you see, the United States is committed to a huge military build-up. President Trump, ideologically and politically, is committed to a build-up. He is militaristic in nature, and he appeals to a certain section in the American population and, in the establishment. And so, therefore, military build-ups have to be justified. You've got to take it beyond normal to create situations for development of, he's talking of, redesigning nuclear weapons, delivery systems, a whole lot of other things, and a huge build-up of conventional warfare. So, he'll have to justify it ideologically. And that has always been done, in the interest of freedom, democracy, and all that, which is fine. This is the military-industrial complex plays a very big role in the American economy. So that is par for the course. Now, as far as China being a challenge to them, I don't see Chinese Navy or Chinese Air Force being a challenge to them for a very, very, very long time. Not in this century, the way I look at it. I think the American advance in technology and sheer firepower and ability to impose its will when push comes to shove on somebody fighting that kind of warfare with them is quite immense. I think it cannot be discounted. We've seen what happened to people like Saddam Hussein, who fought those kinds of wars of maneuver. So China will not get into that. This is a subtle contest for influence in the region,
right,
with countries, and so I think that is something which the Americans will contest. China is emerging as a huge trading partner for ASEAN, is also a trading partner for India.
Right.
And I think what our other panelists said about India, China, India, Japan, Australia all ganging up is kind of very is not really of any significance, because India does not get into any alliances. India keeps its strategic autonomy and it makes its own decisions.
Absolutely. We leave it at that. Gentlemen, Mr. Guruswamy and Aina Tangen, thank you both for joining us this evening and sharing your perspectives with us here on WION.